We continue our guest bartender series, and it's time to do a little trivia night at the bar. And who better to bring in than somebody that works tirelessly on this show? Welcome in Damian Dabrowski. Damian, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, Connor, I think the lesson is we really will let anybody up here at this point.
I mean, that's the point we're at.
I don't know who's coming on Monday, but between this and Lawrence trying to kick Matthew out yesterday, I think we should probably invest in some bar security at some point.
Something absolutely right. There's well, when you get drunk enough, you'll let pretty much anyone in. So Damian, our producer here, probably best known around the show for losing to me at NFL Blitz. Just want to point that out right now. There's a NFL Blitz champion on the set, and it is this guy, not him. Last second touchdown to Jerry Rice. Thank you very much.
Well, I was covering him with the D lineman, so
yeah, that was a mistake by you.
I did not get a choice as to who covered Jerry Rice. It was not a good scene. But yes, trivia. So
okay, what do we got?
Matthew, your 100 facts right on the site. Each year when we put that together, there's obviously a lot of stuff that we can't use, just we have to cut. So I kind of went through a lot of the stuff that we cut and try to pick out some interesting facts that I think can springboard us to talk about some players here. So I'm going to start with running backs, guys, and let's go this. Who led all running backs in yards per target last season? So yards per target, we're talking receiving. Who led all running backs in yards per target last season? We'll start with you, Matthew.
I bet you it's somebody it's not Nick Chubb, but it's somebody like you wouldn't expect, because 100 facts is always about that. But all running backs in yards per target last year. Is there a minimum or just?
Let's say 40 targets. So we're not looking at guys who caught 10 passes, but at least got decent usage.
At least 40 targets. I'll say yards per target. DeAndre Swift.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Tony Pollard, because it felt like every time they didn't give the ball to Zeke and threw it to Pollard that something good happened.
I'll go with Ramondre Stevenson.
Ooh, I like that guess. guess.
So you were on the right track, Matthew. Definitely a surprising answer. It's actually Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry
would have got
led
that.
all running backs in yards per target last season. I think right now, he's going around the 2-3 turn. I think that's probably the lowest we've seen him in the last couple of seasons.
Yep.
And there's a couple of reasons for that, I think, between the age and the volume and the O-line concerns. But I think what we haven't really heard people talk about is if Derrick Henry catches 35, 40 passes again next season, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be a top 5 running back, regardless of all the other things. So I think the question here is, do you see that as something that we're going to see again this season, something that could even expand, or was that an anomaly and we're going to go back to Derrick Henry, what he was before?
I don't think it's an anomaly. I mean, again, I always go back. My friend Ron Chandler, who's a legend in the fantasy baseball industry, always used to say, once you display a skill, you own it. And so that he was referring to baseball players for fantasy baseball, but I think it applies here as well. So the fact that he was, usable as a pass catcher for the Titans last year makes me think they're going to be okay, here's a new wrinkle for us. Again, the other thing is, yes, there are offensive line concerns, and you're always worried about, given the crazy amounts of usage, 3 straight seasons with at least 23.5 touches per game, right? But the other thing is think about this offense. Treylon Burks is now established. You're bringing in DeAndre Hopkins. I love my guy Chig Okonkwo. So all of a sudden, Derrick Henry, who saw probably the most 8-man fronts this side of Nick Chubb, suddenly is going to see some 6- and 7-man fronts, because you can't just load up the box and put DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks in single coverage. You're going to have to, there's going to be some zone coverage. There's going to have to be some lighter fronts. So I think he'll find more running lanes. And, yeah, I do think that there's a chance that we're talking a year from now and that, hey, Derrick Henry had 33 receptions or something like that.
I don't think it's crazy at all. I mean, you just look at that last year and the ways to get him involved and where the offense has gone and keeping him healthy and getting him in space. He's a disaster to tackle in space, and that's another way to get him in space.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with Henry is that the state of that O-line is so dire at the moment that I don't think it's an option to just run him up the middle 350 times. They're going to need to diversify. And Henry, with the screen pass and the home run game, I think could be one way to do it.
All right, Damian, what do you got next for us?
So we'll stick with running backs, but we'll look at kind of the running side of the ball here. Who led all running backs in avoided tackle rate last season? So basically percentage of situations that were able to avoid a tackle, successfully did that. Who had the highest rate last season?
That one I'll say Tony Pollard. I'll say I'll nominate Tony Pollard there.
Okay, I will go with Travis Etienne.
I'll take Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb. Okay, so I'm thinking you went Tony Pollard because of the after contact stuff we talked about earlier,
That's
right?
what I was thinking,
which
that too.
is a good guess, and he's up there. But it was actually Dameon Pierce, who we talked about earlier on the show. And I think he's an interesting guy there too, because things technically kind of went pretty well for him prior to the injury last season, where he got all the work. He was even involved in the pass game. But the team was so bad, he still finished as RB20 in points per game. But I think now, much better line. We're hearing reports that he's even more involved in the pass catching. And we have this stat and many others to show us he was actually really good with the ball last season. What's the upside in Dameon Pierce? Is he somebody that we could be drafting in the 3rd round next season, even though he is on the Texans?
74% of the team rush attempts last year prior to his injury. That was the 3rd highest rate among all running backs as well. 9% target share. Like, he had multiple receptions in 9 of 13 games. Like, actually, so not a complete zero in the passing game. Not a huge part there, but he had 10 different games where he had 15 or more touches. He averaged over 103 yards from scrimmage in those games. To your point, we're not saying the Texans offense is going to be awesome, but they're going to be more competent than they were last year. We expect C.J. Stroud, despite what we saw last night, we expect C.J. Stroud to be a little bit better. To your point about the offensive line, they've invested there as well. Again, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, whatever, the ghost of Robert Woods. Like, there's going to be a more competent passing attack this year in Houston. I like to call Dameon Pierce as somebody who played well when he got a chance last year.
An excellent tackle breaker, and it was also a good sign. I know people think this is crazy, that they were very careful when he started to get banged up last year, because the belief they have in him, they feel like they found a gem in Dameon Pierce in the draft that year. The season was lost last year as they were kind of in that hunt for the number 1 pick and shockingly didn't get it. They shut him down because I think they have massive expectations for him going forward.
Yeah, I think he's criminally underrated. And also, as much usage as he did get last year, I mean, the first week of the season, it was the Rex Burkhead show for whatever reason.
Ridiculous.
Then they went full Pierce. But even after they did that, to your point, at the end of the season, they really did go away from him the last few weeks. And I think back to that primetime game against Philadelphia, where he just carved them up. And I know they didn't have a great run defense, but at the same time, he looked like a top 3 running back in football that night. He's got that level of talent.
And the other thing here, by the way, guys, is like you think about that backfield room. Like, Devin Singletary doesn't scare me at all, and like Dario Gumbawale, like, it's a 3rd down back. Like, I mean, whatever. They played 1 game in a small sample, but like Ogunbowale was coming in on 3rd down, not with the starters, not Singletary. So I don't know. Like, we look for bell cow running backs in fantasy. He's a bell cow running back.
And I know Titus Howard has a minor injury right now, but that line is good. I mean, they've drafted and spent a lot of money on that line. It should help him. All right, Damian, what's our last question here for trivia at the bar?
Let's close it out with some receivers here. So, who is the only player with at least 8 receiving touchdowns in each of the past 5 seasons? So 5 years straight with at least 8 receiving touchdowns. There's only one player who can say they've done that.
Devontae Adams would be my guess.
That would be one of
Good
mine.
guess.
I am going to go Stephon Diggs.
I'll take Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce. All great guesses. It's actually Tyler Lockett. Known touchdown scorer, Tyler
absurd.
Lockett.
Friend of
Which
the
is
show.
I
crazy,
knew that
right?
stat too. Dang it. Dang it. Ah.
I sent it. It got left on the
Yes.
cutting room floor.
I know, it did.
But
It did.
We talked about JSN earlier, right? Coming off that game. If you remember last year when we did our end of year awards, Tyler Lockett was one of our best values for draft picks because he was going as like wide receiver 40, ended up finishing as wide receiver 16 in points per game. Now with all the hype about JSN, is this potentially another year where we look back at the end of the season, we're like, guys, why was Tyler Lockett going after JSN? Why was he going as wide receiver 40?
That part, I agree with you. That part is absolutely crazy. So 3 straight seasons with at least 22% target share. Like, I believe he was wide receiver 12 last year with
I think wide receiver 13 in total points.
Yeah,
'Cause
and wide
he
receiver
plays.
13. I mean, like, he had a great year, a very underrated great year, because there was so much about Geno, and like Geno was such a great story that Tyler Lockett's season sort of got under the rug there. But to your point, 12 games last year with 12 more fantasy points, tied for 3rd among wide receivers. Wow. Like, the talent is there. There's clearly a connection with Geno Smith. That was the concern last year when Russell Wilson moved on. It's like, wow, Russell and Lockett had such a great connection. Is that going to be there with Geno? And it was, guys.
Yeah. I think that with Tyler Lockett, he's kind of in that same bucket with Jacoby Myers and Brandon Cook, so he's not super exciting, but the guy
He's
just
better.
produces,
Yeah.
and he is better than them.
That
I
is-
think, he's very underrated.
The consistency, and you also wonder, does JSN being in that offense maybe even open it up a little bit more, right? He's playing with just DK Metcalf every year, which is great, But still, that you can lock in on a guy like Lockett and Metcalf when it's just them two. So JSN could even help a little bit. And that model of consistency with the touchdowns is just absolutely insane. That's the best trick question, I think, on the list here.
Yeah, again, a guy that was a top 12 wide receiver last year, a top 13 wide receiver in total points, going outside the top 30. And the only reason is because they added another wide receiver. And again, we all like JSN, but like everything else is the same, right? It's the same coaching staff, it's the same quarterback, the whole thing. The hate on Tyler Lockett has gone way too far. Damian, good job. I think you may have earned yourself another gig. You may have to be coming back. Very good trivia. So for our producer, Damian Dabrowski, for Jay Croucher, for Connor Rogers, it is closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We're back on Monday. More preseason games this weekend. We'll break it all down. Remember, Tank Dell, drinks free. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.